Good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. I want to welcome you this morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are LIVE on Facebook, on Blog Talk Radio, on YouTube. Good morning. Woo! It is 2 days after the 4th of July, and I think I'm still recuperating or something. I'm well rested, but we're moving slow this morning. So I want to thank you for joining us. Let's see who is going to join us this morning. Again, I'm Tamara Johnson Shealy. Have some great guests with me this morning. Our conversations always get interesting. Oh, we talk about race, racism, race relations with Acknowledge the Divide with David Slavin. We are going to talk about withholding the vote with Mr. John Armwood, and hopefully we'll have a guest this morning. We're waiting for our guest to actually call in and be a part of this broadcast. Again, good morning. It is Friday, July 6th, 2 days after the 4th, and we are just now catching up from all the excitement. So let's see who's going to join us this morning. Yeah, you're chiming in. We see you. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Whew, what a long week it has been. Current events. We're gonna grab some of those current events with our in-house interviewers, David and John, and we're gonna talk about what's happening around this country. Let's see who's gonna join us. If you see, we have a guest she's out in Texas. She's gonna join us in just a few, so we'll get her on as well. But we're going to go ahead and bring in Mr. David Slavin. David, is always a pleasure to have him on the broadcast. Mr. Acknowledge the Divide himself. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Tamara.
Good morning, y'all. Everybody, David has a computer. David finally has a computer. David, welcome to the age of technology.
Well, I have a computer. It's just 12 years.
You had a dinosaur. Tell the truth.
I've been told that I should donate it to the Smithsonian.
That thing was a dinosaur. We have some people chiming in. Good morning, Barb. Welcome to the broadcast. David, adjust your camera just a little bit so that you're sitting a little more eye level with me, sir. He's new to this whole technology thing, so y'all let's bear with him. So good morning, good morning, good morning. David, how was your 4th?
How was what?
How was 4th of July?
Well,
David, leave the camera alone. You're doing the most.
Is that better?
Just adjust it one time, David, just one time. Y'all, he's brand new to having a camera on his computer.
I'm putting a book underneath so that it.
David, leave it alone. David, leave it alone. It's David. There he goes again, y'all. I said, "How was your 4th?"
It was fine. It was fine.
Welcome. Well, good morning. Good morning. What's going on in the world of racism, and race relations? Have you been watching the news this week?
Yeah. What's your take on it? What do you think has been the most important development?
Well, it was the 4th of July, and a lot of people are, out and celebrating, and not everybody thinks that Black and brown people are free, David. So the 4th of July ain't necessarily a day of independence for Black and brown people. So not everybody celebrated the 4th of July. And I see, John probably have a lot to say about that, and we're going to talk about that more in detail, but that was it.
Wonderful essay by Frederick Douglass on what to the slave is the 4th of July. People can look that up. It makes a really, really, really powerful argument about what it means. There have been some essays that I've come across from the 4th about the American Revolution, and maybe we would have been better off if we had stayed in the British Empire as far as slavery, the abolition of slavery was concerned. That's an interesting conversation, but it's one to be had when we're when we're talking about history. So I do think that there's a very, very significant change that's taking place. There's a wider consciousness about not treating the United States as an exception to world history that I think is appropriate to reflect on while we're thinking about the Declaration of Independence with its high moral tone, written and signed by people who were the richest people in the country, and a significant part of their wealth was held in human beings, in human beings as property. Their decision making that went into deciding to declare themselves independent of the British Empire is a very interesting point that is now getting some attention, which is that the High Court of England made a decision in 1772 called the Somerset decision, which declared that any person who was enslaved and landed on the British Isles was free, that there was no slavery in Britain. And so this person who was the slave body servant of a planter from the West Indies sued for his freedom, and the High Court of England in 1772 declared that slavery was abhorrent and odious and would not be allowed. No person on British soil could be enslaved. English common law rejected, made that impossible as far as the Lord Mansfield, who was the Chief Justice.
Yeah, David, do us a favor before we get too far into the broadcast. Go ahead and adjust your camera again, because you are sitting really low. Just pull your camera down. There you go. Perfect. Right. So you know what? Today's broadcast is about the blue wave. Remember last week when we were talking, we ended our broadcast talking about the blue wave.
Okay, let me just finish up what I was saying in one sentence. When the slave holders of the South in this country heard about that ruling, it sent a shockwave into their politics, and they were afraid that if that ruling was extended to the colonies, that it would mean abolition of slavery. So the next 3 or 4 years, part of what was going on was plotting and planning how to protect their property in human beings from the British government, and ultimately they made the decision that they had to free themselves from the British Empire to preempt this threat. And that is a very important part of the American Revolution that we don't hear about very often. We hear about taxation without representation and British tyranny, but this part is not mentioned. So I would love to go into that more, but you asked about the 4th of July, and that's
he gave us our history lesson for the day. Thank you, David. Good morning, Lena. She's asking for a call-in. Yeah, we're going to put the call-in number up in just a little bit. Yes, ma'am. We definitely have a call-in number. So good morning. Happy 2 days after the 4th. We have Mr. David Slavin, our in-house Acknowledge the Divide correspondent. I don't know if he likes that. He's an instructor. He has a class coming up here in September to acknowledge the divide, white and woke. The name of the class is White and Woke. And how do I wake up other white people? That class is September the 13th, September 27th, October 11th, and October 25th, 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. It is an online class with Mr. David Slavin himself, where we're going to be talking about if you're white and woke and you might be around people that aren't as woke as you are, how do you wake these people up and how do we have these candid conversations? So we will talk about that more as we get into this broadcast. But today's broadcast again is about the blue wave, David.
Yeah.
But blue wave, and you know, we're pretty candid. We have to be intentional about Black and brown, and you know, the red and red. I saw somebody just put in here. They said, and red people, especially red people. We have to be intentional about communities of color as a whole. This blue wave, hopefully, you know, we can turn some things around in this country. But David, what about communities of color?
Well, what about communities of color? Clearly, the momentum for the blue wave is coming out of African American and Latinx communities at this juncture, and GLBTQ communities, and not without Black and brown and red and other communities of color is essential to the success, to electoral success for the Democratic Party. I think that there's another aspect of it that where even the folks who are woke about the necessity for paying attention to not just inviting Black people and other communities of color into this movement, but also to follow the lead of the people who are putting forward the demands that we need to be able to mobilize those communities. Now, incidentally to that, and we know that those demands have to do with universal health care, Medicare for all, free college tuition for state and no debt for college, ending mass incarceration, abolition of ICE may become emerging from that mix. Certainly, the threat, counteracting the threat to women's self-determination of their own bodies, and a whole host of other issues that are now becoming prominent in the Democratic Party. Just saw an email yesterday from Bernie Sanders, Our Revolution. Bernie could not, in 2013, when he first proposed Medicare for all, he couldn't get one Senate sponsor. Now there are 15 Senate sponsors to his bill. So there's been a radical transformation in the attitude towards healthcare as a right. Now, the issue that we need to address is that if we want to put a label on these things, all of them have to do with creating a society that is more supportive of and friendly towards, and a political system that's more supportive and friendly towards working people. And that includes European American working people. If we don't find a way, if we, meaning people who are involved in progressive democratic politics, don't find a way to square the circle of addressing working class people who think and act white, that is European Americans and others as well, who think and act white, and point out to them that protecting their preferred status actually hurts them. It doesn't help them. Then we are going to lose a critical constituency, and with what we have to realize right now is that the blue wave is being counteracted by a red wave, and that's really important to understand, that we're not in a wave election anymore. That Trump and the people around him, Fox News. Now he's put in this guy Schein as his assistant communications director. The merger between Fox News and the White House is now complete, and Schein was the enabler of Roger Ailes in his intimidation and terrorizing of the reporters, female reporters, and Fox staff. He really is one of Trump's monsters, but he's a very effective monster, and we will see, I think, a real mobilization of Trump's base. Now, I don't think that most European American working people are part of Trump's base, and I think to write them off is a losing strategy, because even if they are deeply embedded in the Trump world, there is a possibility of supporting working class white folks in the in resisting the attitudes, the general attitudes around them. If we do that, it's gonna take the battle to the Trump world rather than have it on our territory. I can't believe this.
David got a phone call, y'all. So David, there's an article that I posted. I'm getting some backlash from it. It's Candace Owens, who speaks very candidly on. She's a Black woman. She speaks very candidly on Fox News, and there was a interview that she did, and this article is titled "There Will Be a Major Black Exit from the Democratic Party." And you know what? As crazy as Candace Owens sounds to most of us, I think we need to pay attention. And this is what I wrote in response to this article. It says, Democrats, pay attention. There's a political shift happening in this country, and Black and brown people are the pendulum. There can be no more lip service and no more broken promises by the Democratic Party, candidates, and elected officials. There must be real initiatives that benefit Black and brown communities. There must be a real shift in policy, and there must be real change. And I'm very, Candace is as radical as she is. The girl is really telling the truth about, that Black base that is shifting. And, people, not all Black people are going to be on board with the Democratic Party in 2018 and 2020. So Democrats have to pay attention to what the needs are of these Black and brown communities.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that one of the most important things that European Americans who want the Democratic Party to win this election can do is to go out there and leave Black and brown, if you want to use that term, I leave that organizing to Black and brown people. That's not their role. The role that they have to play is one that has been almost impossible to get European Americans to do, and that is to go out in their own communities and to challenge the idea that racial supremacy actually works to white people's advantage. And part of the reason that position is so difficult for European Americans and other think and act white people to accept is that there is a deep fundamental assumption that white privilege equals benefits. And what I am trying to get across to folks is that is absolutely the wrong perspective to take. White privilege is about social control. It's about maintaining control over the is in support of the power of capital. That is, bosses and corporations, and it creates a situation in which the working people of this country are put into two different categories. They are separate and unequal. So there's segregation and there's also inequality, and the two go hand in hand. Because if you keep people apart, then and not communicating with each other, if one group is watching MSNBC and the other one is watching Fox News, you have two different narratives going on, and that's the to share stories across the color line is going to be crucial for us to be able to pull those working class whites away from the orbit, if not necessarily the vote, of the Republicans and the Trump, the party of Trump.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you a quick story. I know you like stories, David. So I do business with this lady, and I've been doing business with her for years. And I know that she is a Trump supporter. I know it. She and I have these conversations about Donald Trump, the Democratic Party. We're friendly enough with each other, we're respectful enough that we can have these kind of conversations. So I went in to see her. I'm getting some stuff done. So I went in to see her just the other day. And she said to me how, this country's so divided, like the conversations we always have. And she said, I don't see color. And I had to stop her dead in her tracks. And I said, see my color. And she just looked at me and I was like, I'm a Black woman. And I said, see my color. I said, Black and brown people, if people appreciate the fact that you see their ethnicity. Don't dismiss my ethnicity. See my color. See me as a Black woman. And she just kind of stared at me. And then she said, you're not African American. You're just American. I think she was still confused in that moment. She's like, you're not African American. You're just American. I said, no, I am African American. And she just stared at me. I said, you might be European American. She said, no, I'm Native American. And I wouldn't have known that unless she told me. Then she started telling me the history of her family and how they went back and traced her roots, how many people died in Tears of Trails. Like, she started telling me her history. And I'm like, see, I said, this is where we have to get beyond, the divide, and we have to recognize our ethnicities and our differences and our cultures and embrace it. And she said to me, Tamara, I'll never say that again. She said, I'll never say that I don't see color again. And this is an older white woman that now, that was a huge step for her. And that was a big conversation that we had. So we're going to bring, before I let you comment on that, David, we're going to bring John in just a second. Because we want to talk about where we are with those efforts and what's going on with him. And then we're going to bring our callers in, and we're going to keep having these conversations. And we're going to bridge the divide. And this is what it takes, having these hard conversations. So David, stay with us. Let's see where Mr. John is. Mr. John Armwood. He is hey, John, welcome to the broadcast.
Mara, how are you?
Good morning. I know you've been listening in.
Of course.
David and I, as we talk about acknowledging the divide, talking about the blue wave and, making it clear that we can't have a blue wave without Black and brown and red and all different colors in all different communities.
And we've been watching the poll numbers narrow on that issue. And so I don't even want to assume that there's going to be a blue wave, because I think David put it accurately. There's going to be a red wave also. So we have to motivate our votes. Do I hear some feedback there?
No, you're fine.
Okay. A couple of things. I really like some of the points that David made. Not seeing the U.S. as an exceptional nation. That's the gist of one of the first things he wrote. And I think that is so, so important for recognizing what's happening right now with the immigration issue. And this is only another example of how America has treated peoples of color throughout history. So The Somerset ruling during the Civil War, he mentioned during the period of the Revolutionary War, it was actually 4 years before, in 1772, was major. As you saw, Tamara, I posted about that on July 4th. I posted about that ruling and the divide among Native Americans and African Americans, because most African Americans supported the British because of that. So I want to thank David for those things he mentioned. And in getting whites and blacks together, I really see it focusing on issue, interest convergence. There's some issues that we can all identify with. Medicare for all. That's something that affects everybody. You could be a coal worker in Virginia with black lung disease. You could be an inner city person with asthma. And you both need health care. That these are the issues that cut across class lines and racial, what I like to call caste lines, status lines. And so, I really think we need to focus on those. The abortion issue. Now, the abortion issue is a little bit more complex in the black community because you have a strong fundamentalist Christian population, and many of them do oppose the abortion. They tend not to be as politically rigid on it as white evangelicals, but black evangelicals have problems with it, and many of them have been influenced by white evangelicals to think very hard. So we have to navigate those issues with church leaders, because that's going to be a major area of difficulty for us. Roe v. Wade, splits a lot of folks, particularly in our region of the country, and very much so. So we've got to get issues that really affect us. The Supreme Court, on a wide breadth of issues, affects us across racial and class lines. The decision in the Janus case, which basically took away the economic clout that unions have with workers. They can no longer require workers to pay union dues. In other words, the closed shop, as we know, and we talked about this last week, is gone effectively without some state regulation coming in to try to protect it. And I've been following that very, very closely over the past week, and it's still evolving.
So, John, we are getting a little bit of feedback from you. I'm not sure if it's where you're sitting. I hope that it's not so bad that they can't hear you. So, chime in somebody and let me know if it's so bad that you can't hear him. He does have another computer, and if we have to switch computers, we will. But hopefully we are. John, you can't get up, sir.
I was looking to where my microphone. I was going to put on my. Sorry, I was going to.
John, stay with me. I'll take you off the screen in a minute, but don't stand up. Don't run away.
I want to act like Chuck Schumer and stay on the screen.
So you know what? I bring John and David on because I want people to, especially with this topic where we're talking about the blue wave and not without black and brown, because there's different sides of different perspectives that I think David comes from one perspective as an older white gentleman, John from another perspective as an older black gentleman. There's different perspectives as we look at this blue wave that is happening. And we have to hear both sides of it. And this is how Democrats win. We talk about, thanks. She said that the feedback was not so bad. Thank you. We appreciate that, Janice. So we talk about, what's happening here politically, and we have to be intentional as Democrats. Because what I don't want people to really take out of context is our efforts with withhold the vote. Withhold the vote is speaking to those people that are already withholding their vote. And if we don't have they must have a strategic reason to get out and vote. They're already sitting on the sidelines. They're not going to be shamed into voting. They're not going to feel guilty about voting. We have to meet people where they are. And if they're sitting on the sidelines, let's be strategic about having them vote their issues, vote the issues, vote their interests, bring them into the fold as we can bring them into the fold. We're not going to win over everybody, but we have to have a conversation with everybody as Democrats, because that's who we are, Democrats. This is the big tent, right? So this is the big tent, and we're going to include everybody. That means we have to have conversations with everybody, even when they don't agree with us and we don't agree with them. So last week when we had that Trump supporter on the line, I was glad to hear from him, because guess what? Now we get to hear their perspective in a space where we're not making him feel like he's wrong. We're just going to educate each other in the process, and hopefully we'll all come to some middle ground. That's what democracy is. It's meeting, Republicans think one way, Democrats think another way, but democracy is us getting this thing right in the middle somewhere, because there's some middle ground that we just have to find. So John, I just want to thank you, because like I said, your perspective is sometimes a little different. Last week we could see a little tiff last week between you and David. It was some sort of intellectual battle, and I'm gonna tell you, it was so over my head and the heads of most of us that were watching. I'm like, I don't know enough about history to the extent that they do to even have an opinion. So we just watched this tennis match between the two of you. So today I'm hopeful that as we have these dialogues, you guys are able to bring it down to a level that we can all interpret and we can all understand the difference, and how we bridge these divides in our communities, and how we win as Democrats. It really is about winning. And I don't want anybody to think that, withhold the vote is about people not voting. It's the most ignorant thing that I keep seeing people saying, telling people not to vote. We're telling people not to vote. That is not what we're saying. And if that's as far as you can think, please keep watching these broadcasts so we can help you think further. So I'm going to bring David back in just a few minutes, John. But July 4th was just this past week, and we're talking about Black people and brown people and red people. I saw some videos on Facebook where everybody doesn't feel the same about July 4th.
That is true. I think you saw what my post on July 4th was. I tried to be a little humorous about it. And I got a large reaction to it. I put happy dead colonizers and slave masters conquest day. And I got a bunch of people that humorously reacted to that. And it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek, humorous way, because I've never celebrated the 4th of July as a holiday. I've always felt it was alien to me. I mean, every 4th of July since the internet, since 1995, I've been putting up either James Earl Jones or Danny Glover reading Frederick Douglass's 1850 speech in Rochester, where he says, 4th of July, slave, he talks about hypocrisy.
Lean into your camera a little bit. Maybe you're too far back. There
okay.
You go.
Talks about the hypocrisy. And that speech I've always used as like a book tale, the bookend to Martin Luther King's April 4th, 1967 Riverside church speech against the war in Vietnam. In both speeches, both of them, 100 years apart, talk about the United States as the most violent nation on the face of the planet. And it's something that we don't tend to recognize.
And you know what I posted this past week, John, is that America has the largest prison population in the world. So on this July 4th, for us to have the largest prison population in the world, we're not free.
No, we're not. And the what Michelle Alexander calls the new Jim Crow. And I posted that her speech from her at the University of Chicago in 2014, talking about that 2 years after her book was published, and she made that point. We incarcerate more people in the United States than does China. We have a population of what, 365 million, the last census. China has over 1.3 billion people, and we incarcerate.
Yeah.
And we think China is bigger, more oppressive nation.
Yeah, we still have a lot of work to do. That's an issue with in the Black and brown community. When you think about how our families have been destroyed, first of all, from slavery, they destroyed Black and brown families from the root, from the slave ships, breaking our families apart and doing what they're doing today with our immigrants that are coming into this country, just tearing these families apart. You know, we've been victims of this for hundreds of years. So, you know, and they have
I didn't get this light by accident. I didn't get this light by accident, and it wasn't by choice. In fact, I know who some of the white ancestors were. One family that got to my great grandmother. Oh yeah. The name Prusius, the Prusius family. Couldn't keep out the cabin.
Yeah. So we have, you know, a community of, like I say, Black and brown people that we have to recognize our pain. Like white America has to recognize the pain. That's why Acknowledge the Divide is so important, the work that we're doing with David, because you have to recognize the pain that Black and brown people, we still they're still being inflicted on us. Like we're still in the trenches. We're still in slavery. We're still in bondage. You can go into our urban communities and you can ride through there. You don't even have to get out of your car. Just ride through some of our urban communities and you can see the difference. You can see the economic divide. You can see the racial divide. You can see it. It's prevalent. It's here. It's, you know, we have work to do, you know, to rectify some problems that, you know, from slavery. We have work to do, and to ignore the unemployment in this country. Like Black and brown people are still, you know, our unemployment rates are high. Our wages are extremely low. And I understand that, you know, we're, like I teased David about, we're in this age of technology. I understand that people have to go back to school now. We got to get additional training. I understand that, but we have to make a way for a lot of people to do it. We got to reach back. Those of us that quote unquote think we've made it, we have to reach back. And this country has a lot of work to do.
And people, and the sad part is, I mean, even if you do get the credentials, you still make far less money than white people with the exact same credentials as you.
Mm-hmm.
This is, for every single study shows this. If you have a top 20 professional degree or PhD from a top 20 school, your white classmates, who many times got lower grades than you, will get a higher paying job. I personally saw this. This is the way America is.
But I don't want to believe
a lot of it's structural.
Where you and David like had your little tiff last week. I'm glad you said that. I have to have, my generation and generations moving forward, we have to have hope. Like I can't do this unless I have some hope that things are going to.
Let me address the hope issue.
Because I know you feel like this is a permanent structure.
Oh, I mean, that's not a feeling to me. To me, it's a foregone conclusion. To me, it's obvious. To me, it's presumptuous of us to think that in our generation, as Dyson says, that the apotheosis of history comes together in our generation, and we're going to change over 400 years of history in this one generation. To me, that's silly.
I don't think that. I don't think that this generation, or I think that we have work to do to make an impact. Like it's like
impact, and this is where interest convergence comes together, and it's so important to understand that concept. There are issues that matter to people, where people can come together and achieve attainable goals, i.e. the Affordable Care Act, even though it's getting weakened and destroyed right now. That has helped thousands of people, myself included.
Mm-hmm.
I got an operation when I had cancer that I could not have gotten because my disability benefits for my job ended because the school I was a professor at went out of business. I was uninsurable without the Affordable Care Act because I had a pre-existing condition, cancer. I know what that feels, and I needed an emergency surgery for incisional hernia. So I would have died without it. So I know, that there are tangible benefits. The hope comes in twofold. One, when you are struggling, you get a sense of satisfaction and a sense of hope from your accomplishments and seeing that you can make accomplishments. I've been in this since, actively doing this since 1969. And so hope is not an issue for me because I see it. I place my hope in that. I see it as no different from the fact that I know I'm going to die someday, but I hope tomorrow is going to be a better day for me.
Yeah.
And I think this afternoon to be better than yesterday.
What I'm saying is that this generation, in order for, we want to see progress, we want to see change. That's why we're having these conversations. That's why we are working to bridge the divide. I'm going to bring David back in because this is where it gets real interesting with the two of you. Like I say, I love the difference in perspective because John is
one thought, one last thing. I think that it may help you. It may help.
It's going to help.
The big changer is technology. Technology is crucial to understanding this. The whole history of the United States, slavery ended largely because of a change in technology. Technology is crucial. Thomas Friedman read a very important book in 2005, The World is Flat, where he talked about the technology, the coming together of the internet, the Office suite of programs for Microsoft, and the Netscape One browser came together to put people on a flat playing field who had never been on that playing field before. It didn't matter whether you were in Bangalore, India, or in Albany, Georgia. You could get on the internet, market your ideas, market your products, and make a dent in society. And it's happening.
David, John, is like I say, I appreciate the fact that the two of you are on different ends of the spectrum. And like I said, last week's dialogue was a little intense, and I think we all appreciated the intellect between the two of you. But I have to have hope. I have to know. I can't live not fighting for a better country, a better nation, a better people, a better Democratic Party, because I don't want anybody to think that I'm not, I'm full. I know who I am, and I want to see this party be better and more inclusive and more intentional about all communities and communities of color. David.
Yeah, where do I start? I mean, this idea of interest convergence, which I think is really very, very prevalent among people who are just even thinking about the issues of how we bring the interests of European American and people of color together. Is a very important conversation to have. But if we say that it's a foregone conclusion that the interests of European American working people and African American working people diverge from each other, then we're never going to ask the question of what costs come with the apparent benefits of being in a situation of privilege. And we really have to make a distinction between class privilege and racial privilege. Class privileges do actually bring benefits. The 9.9% who are what we might call the middle class, who are enablers and the foundation for both political parties, do reap benefits. They don't reap as much. They don't reap the billions that the billionaires get from so-called tax reform, which was really another way of redistributing in wealth upward in the social ladder. That tax reform is, I mean, unless we start to address that with European American working people about just what it is that they actually got from that, we're not going to make any headway. Now, here's a different way of looking at the issue of interest convergence, and that is to say that European American working people are both exploited and privileged. Non-European American people of color who are in the working class are both exploited and oppressed or subordinated. Now, those two groups have a convergence of interest, a strategic convergence of interest in the fact that both of them are being exploited by the same exploiters. This is exactly what Frederick Douglass was talking about in his autobiography when he said that the slave masters, with a craftiness peculiar to themselves, succeeded in making the slave, rather than the slave system, the enemy of the white worker. And then through flattery, the white worker is convinced that the elite, the bosses, are actually in their and they are actually on the same side, and that is the big issue that we face today. Is, can we commit to this? This is not a convergence of interests. This is class interests, and the fact that both groups are exploited. And that by thinking and acting white, European American working people actually hurt themselves. This is very different from being an upper middle class white person, where the issue of white where the issue of class interests actually benefits them. So when you have labor unions for the last 100 years or so, protecting the privileged status of European American union members, they're not helping those union members, those European American union members. They're hurting those European American union members. They are creating a disaster for the union members as a whole, and we can see that over the last 50, 60 years, since the late 1940s, that the union movement has never recovered from the Taft-Hartley Act, which created all of the conditions that prevented the unions from organizing in the South, created the state's ability to implement right-to-work laws, which is what we're just getting now. The Supreme Court decision is a further extension. The Janus decision that was just made is a further extension of right to work. Now you do not have to pay, even if you're in a union or in a bargaining unit, a profession that is represented by a union. You don't have to pay union dues. So the unions are going to be faced with a crisis at this point. They can no longer simply rely on the agency shop of getting dues deduction automatically, and they're going to have to work for every union member that they get. In order to hold on to the unions. The same has to be said about the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has taken Black people for granted, has taken other people of color for granted, and at the same time, they have used that base, the fact that Black and Latino and other people of color have voted overwhelmingly Democratic, to avoid coming to grips with the fact that they have lost the white section of the working class. Mm-hmm. They've used it as a compensation.
David, you're tapping on the table. We can hear the tap. Let me open up the call-in line. Our call-in number is 929-477-3442 for those of you that want to call in, and let's talk about this. There is a quote-unquote blue wave, but we have to be mindful that there may be a red wave too. But we cannot dismiss Black and brown communities. We have to be intentional. We have to be forthcoming. We have to bridge the divide. We have to have hard conversations. We have to be uncomfortable. Please call in. Again, the number is 929-477-3442. We would love to hear from you. Talk to David, talk to John, talk to me. Let's have a very candid conversation.
Let me say one thing about what gives me hope in this context, in this situation. And that is that it doesn't take every white working class person to repudiate privilege, to act in solidarity with working people of color. It only takes a critical mass. And once that critical mass is achieved, the white privilege system no longer works. We don't know what that critical mass proportion or number is. We don't even know where most white working people are. They're all mixed in and embedded with the rest of whites because of racial segregation. And so they don't have any chance to have the position like what you just did, the story that you told about that older supposedly white woman, revealing to you something that when you challenged her, it didn't take more than a couple of minutes to change her mind. And that's how fragile this racial privilege system is. If it just took you a couple of minutes to change the mind of somebody who is, I don't know how old she was, but she's
older. She's older. You know what? And I think because she respects me and I respect her, and we have a great relationship, that even though we're on both different sides of the aisle, she heard me in a way that she never, she wouldn't. Yeah, she definitely heard me with her heart, not with her mind.
You also listened to her.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And that's the crucial piece of this puzzle, is that between the two of you there was mutual respect, and through that mutual respect, you were able to bridge the color line.
Yes.
You were able to get her to acknowledge the divide.
Yep. And we always, and she hugged me, and we hugged each other. Even after that, we gave each other a nice hug, and I'll see her again in a couple weeks.
Here's some of what I see as the underlying reason for that. The underlying reason is that in spite of all of the dehumanization that is the hallmark of thinking and acting white, people underneath it are both what I would call decent, but also they have an impulse towards solidarity. That impulse towards solidarity comes from being part of the exploited, and the folks that are here's an example, just a tiny little story.
Wait, before you tell your story, David, let's let John jump in, because John, you've been quiet. I know you're going to take in notes.
That story is a tiny little example of the potential that we have. If we could repeat that potential, over and over again, if we can convince European American, activists and progressives that they can do the kinds of things that you're doing, that you did in that circumstance, the privilege system, the racial privilege system, as a system of social control, as a system of enlisting European Americans to help in the process, in the domination and subordination of their brothers and sisters, is going to be undermined.
Okay, let John jump in, please.
Yeah.
The first thing I'm curious about, and obviously we won't know until November, would be, Tamara, how that lady will vote.
Well, she's voting for Donald Trump.
and that's what I expected. There's a difference between respect and conversation, and people switching their policy votes on policy.
No, she's voting for Donald Trump.
And I think that we on the left many times underestimate why people do that. It's not just economic. And this was something that I really felt that the Marxists in the 30s through the 60s, even into the 70s, really, really missed. I used to argue with them when I was in college in the early 70s about this, because status to many people is as important, if not more important, than bare bones economic. It's a tangible interest for people. Why do people that are poor and can't afford it, buy fancy cars, fancy clothes? They want the status of it. Being privileged and seeing oneself as privileged gives you a status. That's what has kept this, what I call caste system, in place, even though there is an incredibly large class system. That's why last week I mentioned Thomas Watson, because back in the 1880s, he tried to organize both black and white farmers and was pretty successful at it. He ended up being co-opted by the wealthy whites. This happens all the time, across racial lines. And by the time he was in Congress at the beginning of the 20th century, he was allied with the Ku Klux Klan, had totally crossed to the other side. And that was the biggest populist movement of the 19th century, and just happened to have happened right here in Georgia. Now, his influence spread way beyond Georgia, but it's important to understand that we're endeavoring in what I would call a Herculean task. This is not easy. And this is why I think that interest convergence is really important. We have to find individual, tangible issues that we can work together. I watched one of my father's first cousins with white working people in Hillsborough County, Florida, where my family is from. The county wanted to build a dump in Sefton, Florida, which is a suburb east of Tampa, out Route 92. Both my father's first cousin, Hazel Orsley, organized both black and white workers, and there were other white workers in the model that David envisioned. And they got T-shirts. I mean, I'm down there and went to some of their rallies. And over a period of about 3 or 4 years, they were able to stop the dump from coming in their neighborhood. I mean, this happened. That happened because there was an interest convergence. There was an issue. Healthcare I see as such an issue. Abortion I see as such an issue, with the limitations that I mentioned before. The religious communities on both sides are going to dislute to some degree. But it's an important. The Supreme Court generally, I think, is a major issue that we can come together on. LGBTQ rights are clearly important across the board, though I've met many people in the black community who do not support them. And it drives me crazy, but I have met people in the black community, and I'm sure Mary you have, and Dave you have too, that do not support them. So they're not monolithic bloc, but there are enough people there that we can gain support and hopefully make progress and actualize our hopes.
Yep. And these are conversations, I get excited about this. And everybody, I put the call-in number on the screen. Again, it's 929-477-3442. 929-477-3442. Call in. David and John and I, we can talk, and we talk all the time, but we definitely want to hear from you. again, give us a call in, don't be shy. I see a lot of you chiming in, a lot of you are watching. Call in and let's talk. Black and brown and red and communities of color as a whole must be intentional for the Democratic Party. It must be this blue wave. If you are not intentional about going out, knocking on those doors, having these conversations, meeting people wherever they are, Democrats, we are not going to win. We're not. And it has to be a work where we're working to acknowledge the divide. We have to, and in some cases, guess what? This withhold the vote. Some people aren't going to vote. They're not going to vote. And, and they're going to, but if we can get them to vote their interests or, vote strategically, those are votes that we can count. So let's have these conversations. David, I know you want to jump in, but I want to be mindful that we have some audience members some people that we want to get to call in. So jump right on in, David.
Yeah, I think that where we are coming to, I think this is a very, very critical conversation to be having. Let me, and I do not agree with John with your interpretation of the populist revolt, but I don't want to go into that right now.
Don't please, okay, John, this is where John and David have these intellectual debates, and because those of us that are not, let me say this, those of us that are not so, we don't know the history to the extent that they do, this conversation or their conversations can get so deep, so we're not going to have that conversation. David, acknowledge the divide.
I just wanted to say
acknowledge
that.
The divide.
John is
what don't you agree with? I would just like to hear that.
John.
I just want to say that that's a long conversation and that's important to have, but it's not here. Let me just raise this issue about status. Status is a really important question to bring up, because what John is saying is that this creates that status, or the appeal of status separates European American from people of color. And my suggestion here is that, and that status is a tangible interest. I agree, but I would put it in an entirely different frame and say that this drive for status is what I call white consumerism. And it is an effort by working class whites to be able to create the conditions around themselves for being part of the white race. And they are that. So white consumerism, seeing it as white consumerism, is really, really, I think, puts the whole issue of status in an entirely different context. And let me point out that it has terrible costs for European American working people, because they put themselves into debt to get out of neighborhoods that are changing from that are demographically changing. They put themselves deeply into debt to leave those neighborhoods, often by undervaluing the houses that they're leaving. So what's been created? Please, John. Please let me. You had your opportunity. Let me finish the thought, okay? So that situation, that is what I would call the privilege of debt, and the privilege of debt has been reserved for European Americans for the most part. European American working people during the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. Then what began to happen was that not only did a second the household require a second income, in other words, both parents working, so the privilege of having a stay-at-home female, usually spouse, was eroded. But also people began to take out second mortgages on their homes. because they could not afford to keep up the white consumerism. So you have
David,
let
me speak. You've spoken on. Let me get in. You're dominating the whole conversation, and I can't speak. This was long before consumerism. This was long before the modern consumer economy. David, this has been going on since the 17th century. I don't know when your ancestors came here, but my ancestors have been here since the 1600s.
Okay, but now you're bringing the conversation back into historical.
You're talking over me again.
Well, that I have.
David, let John speak.
Your interpretation.
I would like equal concern and respect. Lord.
Okay. Y'all, you know what? I have two very intellectual, I'm going to put them both in timeout. Call in. Our calling number is 929-477-3442. Again, 929-477-3442. I put them in timeout, y'all. I have to let them cool off every once in a while. They both are very opinionated. They are both very intellectual, and the conversation sometimes gets a bit heated. I think we appreciate the intellect. We appreciate the dialogue. And I'm going to bring one of them back. I'm gonna bring John back, and then in about 2 minutes, I'm gonna bring David back, and we're gonna try this all over again. But please call in and talk. Again, 929-477-3442. John, I'm gonna bring you back to the broadcast. Are you there?
I'm here. I would just like a semblance of equal time, which I'm not getting. It's very frustrating, and especially when what I'm saying is being mischaracterized. The issue of status is not consumerism. That's a false dichotomy. This dates back to the agrarian economy before consumerism ever existed. It has to do with, as poor as you are, I may be dirt poor, but I ain't a black slave. I ain't a black tenant farmer. I'm not living in the ghetto. However you want to depict it at a particular point in time, from the 1600s to the 21st century, that attitude has still been there. Technology has changed the conversation. And where David is confused is that he's stuck in one technological.
No, let me tell you what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Let me tell you what I'm thinking and what I'm hearing. What I hear is cultural. Because I can tell you that we know how we are as a people, and this is where we're going to have a different kind of conversation, and I'll have a different conversation with David. We as a people, particularly black people, and I'm going to speak from the black perspective. I don't care how broke, how poor, how messed up, jacked up we are, we're going to always look good, right?
Yeah, but this is a different discussion. He's talking about white privilege. He's not talking about us.
Yeah, but I want you to talk about us. What I don't want is the two of you to debate, because I like the fact that you have your own general perspective, so stay in your lanes. So if you come back with me and let's talk about it from a black perspective. Stay with me. Let's talk about it from the black perspective. Can we? That
just destroys the whole discussion, because you've got to understand it from an American perspective, which includes black and white. It's not in isolation. Yeah. And I've been studying this for a long time, over 40 years.
Okay. Go ahead.
This is my wheelhouse.
Okay, go ahead. I'm giving you the floor, John.
This is my wheelhouse. And the status issue has always been a wedge that's been used by the elites of this society since the founding of the first Virginia colony. Then the farm system was set up to divide for black and white workers. They could say, if there was anything else, we are not like them. They could identify with the slave master. If they could own land, if they could live in a certain neighborhood, I don't live with them. They're on the other side of the track.
So they want to identify. So basically you're saying that they're identifying with
the elites.
The elites. Okay.
That's the function of white skin privilege. So the poorest white sees himself as possibly one day becoming like the slave master. That's the American dream.
Now bring it to the Black perspective. Now I want you to bring it to like the Black perspective. How do we see it? Because that's where I was trying to take you.
Okay. How we see it is white folks being white folks and basically running a game where we get the short end of the stick. And so what we've always done is adapted strategies to try to make our position better. As a clear example, the most famous one, of course, was developed in the 20th century, in the early years, by W.E. Du Bois, James Weldon Johnson, Lorraine Hansberry. The people that call themselves the New Negro. We were going to be proper. We were going to be acceptable to white people. And maybe we would survive and prosper because of that. It did not work. We call it now respectability politics. My mother, even into the 60s and 70s, was an advocate of that, though she recognized the problems with it.
That's where we straighten our hair. That's where we live in these prominent neighborhoods. That's where we drive the finest cars. That's where we try to do the same thing, is identify with the elites. So you have what David is saying is you're basically saying the same thing. That's what I'm hearing. Where both Black, white, we're always trying to identify with some sort of status with the elites. Because I hear you saying the same thing.
But in reality, those statuses are not the same, because what would happen, and you're looking in the more modern times, when a neighborhood, Blacks would move into a neighborhood, and I saw this in major cities around the country. I've seen this. The whites move out. It's called white flight, and everybody in the audience has heard of that term.
Yes.
Blacks move in, whites leave. Now, there are instances when that doesn't happen. Don't get me wrong, but that is what generally happens.
Okay. We have a caller, and I am going to bring this caller in, but I'm going to put you in the lobby with David. Now, no fighting, just in the lobby. All right, let's see. We have a caller. Let's see who we have on the line. Caller, are you with us?
So I hear what everybody's saying, and I do identify with this conversation. I do see this as being a very hot topic amongst my group of people. So many times I think we find white people, they forget their ancestry. So we do have the white Europeans that forget that their ancestors have come here in the late 1800s. They came over during the immigration times where, immigration was very, very different. They came over during the Ellis Island times, and, immigration laws were very unrestricted, and things were just very different. And yes, they are adapting and becoming, just different. They have that privilege of the white skin, and they are able to adapt and blend in, so to speak. And I think, currently, during the changing times where immigration laws are just completely different. Obviously over this last century, things have just changed dramatically. And, it's just a different time. We just see things evolving, and, it's sort of like, they're clutching their pearls. They feel like things are being taken from them. And that's just, honestly, everybody's just fearful. And that's really just a change of the media, being so involved, social media, things just being over exaggerated. And I really feel like, everyone's being misinterpreted, and it's really sad. And I think if we just had a lot more dialogue, everyone would be better understood. And I think there are just so many people that are misunderstood, and there's just not enough dialogue.
and I appreciate you calling in and helping to help us to have this dialogue, because this is what it takes. It takes us having these hard conversations. It takes us hearing each other's the different perspectives. So we definitely appreciate you. Tell us, who is this again?
90 seconds.
Who is this?
This is Lena.
Hey, Lena. Yes, Lena. Lena is a friend to our broadcast. I thank you for calling in and being a part of this broadcast every week. And we have to continue to talk. I think if we continue to do what we're doing, Lena, something's going to break and something's going to happen. And I think it's going to be a positive change for all of us. So thank you again for calling in, Lena. So we're going to bring these fellas back out of the lobby. Let's see if they can we can continue to have these conversations, and let's bring them back. We'll bring David Black back first, since we just had John. John, we'll bring you back in just a second. David?
Yeah, hi.
Are you better now?
Well, I want to continue this case that I was making about white consumerism. I'm just using that term, and as a point of reference to elucidate, to bring up, to shine a light on the fact that this has that this effort of white or European American working people to become part of the white race, to identify with the white race, comes with hidden costs. And the hidden costs are that they put themselves into debt for the last since the 1970s, and increasingly that debt has been coming back to bite them.
Yeah, we only have about like three minutes left in this broadcast, David. So what I want you to do is, in reference to our topic today, this blue wave that's coming, and the title was Blue Wave, Not Without Black and Brown. So, I know that you are, we're working. So, give us some parting words on how we get to the next step, one step at a time.
Well, it's a matter of listening to people's stories and helping them to understand both the hidden costs for European Americans, both the hidden costs of avoiding the issues that they are that unite them with people of color, with working people of color. The hidden costs of ignoring or avoiding those things that unite them have to do with their assumptions that they are white, and that has some value to them. This is where the issue has to be. This is where the rubber hits the road. This is where for European American working people, they have to think about the issues of just what not only the value or the is, but what the hidden costs are. And if we can emphasize that, and we can only do it, we meaning European Americans of well-intentioned, we can only do that if we are involved with people of color who can show us where the difference, where the divides are, who can show us how to acknowledge the divide. And then it's really up to us collectively across the color line to present this to European Americans, to present what are the real costs, because the benefits are illusory.
Yeah. So David is hosting a class, and we're going to be talking about this every week, and hopefully we'll get you guys to come out. This class is called Acknowledge the Divide. It's white and woke, and how do I wake up other white people? If you are white and you are woke, and many around you don't seem to get it, racism, and race relations are the root of this country's divide, and you're the only one talking about it. So let's get to having these conversations. David's class is Thursday, September the 13th, from 6:30 to 9:30. Thursday, September 27th, 6:30 to 9:30. Thursday, October the 11th, 6:30 to 9:30. Thursday, October 25th, 6:30 to 9:30. This class is online, so be a part of it. It's a 4-class series. It gives us an opportunity to take some tools away from his class, go out and see how they work, and come back, and we keep talking and we keep dialoguing. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, David. So we won't bridge these divides with one conversation. We'll have to continue to have these conversations. Here's the website, tamarashealy.com/acknowledge the divide. I am just his co-host. This is David's lane. I bring the black and brown perspective, a black perspective. So join us again. The website is tamarashealy.com/acknowledge the divide. So David, stay with us. I'm going to bring John into the broadcast, and we are going to let him give a few parting words on his way out as well. We'll be doing this again next Friday, every Friday at 11 o'clock a.m. John, I see you showing us a book.
Yeah, this book, Joan Walsh, What's the Matter with White People, talks about these issues in a very honest and clear way. And she bases it largely with her family and in others, and showing how the liberals have joined in the us versus them dialogue. That's class status versus status dialogue that we're talking about. And she says that the past 40 years have really been a period of scapegoating by the conservatives of blacks, and this is what the white working class has adopted. Whether it was Reagan's welfare queens, Willie Horton with George W. Bush, the Hispanics with Trump, it's the same thing. Nixon prior to them, it was just law and order focused on black folks because of the civil rights demonstrations and riots. And she is saying that white folks have to come up with a new mind. If we were white and woke, please read Joan Walsh's book. She is a commentator also on MSNBC. This is an excellent book, came out 2 years ago. I would highly recommend it because she deals with these issues in a very clear, concise, and honest way.
John, yeah, we won't, like I said, we're going to continue to talk. We're definitely going to have you back on this broadcast. We appreciate, I know it gets a little testy with you and David. I love it. I think the audience can appreciate it.
Well, I would just like get a few minutes in and speak if I'm going to be.
Trust me, we're going to work on that. We're going to work on it with both of y'all. Maybe we'll just have to separate y'all and just give you all your own little segments or something. We're figuring it out. As I said before, we are developing a broadcast. So this is a lot of the working out of the kinks right here live in person. So we are, again, thank you for joining into this week's broadcast. Next week, we're going to come back with some more hard, candid conversations. John, I want to thank you for joining us. We totally appreciate you.
You appreciate me.
We all appreciate you. Again, I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. You can visit our website. It's my website, tamarashealy.com/acknowledge the divide for David's class. Be a part of what we're doing. We will be back next Friday, 11 o'clock a.m. We're going to continue to have these hard conversations. We're going to continue to talk about race, racism, and race relations, and how we actually bridge this divide. There's so much work to do. We are Democrats. We're just having the conversations that most Democrats don't have. They're telling people just go vote. But that's like telling somebody, well, just go to the grocery store. But what are you going to buy when you get there? Where is the grocery store? So you can't just tell people to just go vote. You got to give them, reasons to go and vote. You got to give them, you give them something more than just go vote. They say people died for us to have this right to vote. Absolutely. But they've died. It's a strategy in us voting, not just to go out and just randomly give our votes away. We have to make sure that those that are voting for us, those are the right ones and they're addressing the issues that affect all of us. Not every Democrat is a good Democrat. Not every Republican is bad. So we need to figure this thing out, and we need to fix it, and we need to reach across the aisle, and we need to rebuild this country. So again, I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. Join us again next Friday at 11 o'clock a.m. right here. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.